Greetings all, Valheim Higton here, and recently I've been busy building a bunch of beautiful bases across a batch of biomes in Valheim. This video is one part guide and one part diary, so hopefully it will light the fires of inspiration deep within your soul and help you come up with your own original creations, because, like my ancestors once said, only dead fish follow the stream.
Before this video kicks off properly though, I should point out that I did use the cheat-enabled creative mode for all of the following builds, so be aware that they will take a huge amount of resources and time to build if you attempt to do something like this legitimately. In creative mode, however, these bases took me only around 90 minutes a piece to make, so if you do choose to do it this way, it shouldn't take you too long to whip up something wonderful.
One should listen when an old dog barks, so our first port of call is a history lesson in the meadows.
The meadows are a lovely place to build, they really are. Not only are there many flat open areas in this biome which boast some lovely views across the countryside, but also it's normally only a short walk in any direction to the Black Forest and a bounty of natural resources. Added to that, it's also by far the most chill biome in the game, so if you're attempting to do a fancy build on a multiplayer server where you can't activate cheats, this is obviously the best place to do it. The meadows also feel like the most authentically Viking location in the game, so what better place than here to live out your Norse fantasies and create some proper historically inspired buildings, like this longhouse what I gone done made. For this build, I took inspiration from Trelleborg in Denmark. Trelleborg is the location of the best preserved Viking ring fortress in the world, and historians and archaeologists have used measurements and historical data found during digs on this site to accurately reconstruct one of the many longhouses that would have sat within its walls. Because this recreation is so well known, there were plenty of photos of it to be found online that I was able to use as a guide, and I suspect that maybe the developers of the game might have done the same. You see, one of the coolest things about Valheim is that the designs of the building blocks in this game closely match the look of the materials that have been used in the Trelleborg recreation. This meant I could follow the design of this longhouse's exterior pretty closely and match its approximate shape and size. Detailed photographs of the interior of Trelleborg are slightly harder to find, mind, but I was able to use images taken from a variety of other recreated longhouse interiors in order to lay down an accurate frame from which to build on. As you can see from this footage, I basically separated the longhouse into 3 sections, with entrances at the front and rear, and a couple of smaller side entrances near the front as well, just like you can see in the photos of the actual Trelleborg longhouse. The most challenging part here was probably placing down the roof though. I could have used cheats to fly and place the materials that way, but I didn't want to make things too easy for myself, so instead I placed ladders on certain parts of the roof to stop myself from slipping down, while I then tried to add the finishing touches. Pretty much every interior shot of a longhouse that I found also included a fire pit somewhere along the centre channel, so after placing a couple of those down, I made sure to also add chimney holes to the roof above them in order to give the smoke somewhere to go. From there it was just a case of decorating the interior, and once again I used photos of recreated interiors for inspiration, hence all the rugs on the floors and the mounted shields on the walls. As you can see from the exterior, it doesn't have that signature gentle curve to the roof that Trelleborg has, but it's still pretty accurate nonetheless. Going in through the rear entrance, I've created a crafting room here and filled it with workbenches. Then in the middle section, I've got my storage room and banquet area, and then just behind here, separating this section from the sleeping quarters, are these little side entrances that I mentioned earlier. Then finally there's the bedroom area, which I've made extra cozy by placing down a load of rugs. And here you can see one of those chimneys in action just above my cooking station. I really enjoyed putting this longhouse together, as it felt like a bit of a self-imposed history lesson. But if this has inspired you to do something similar, the best thing is you can find plenty of artists' impressions online that show you what the full Trelleborg ringed fortress would have looked like back in the day. So if you ever fancy giving yourself a big old project, recreating an actual period authentic Viking ring fortress should keep you busy for quite some time.
It has been said that a boatless man is tied to the land. So behold, my forest harbour base with a secret underground entrance for all your sailing and storage needs.
Back in the early days of my time in Valheim, I used to do a lot of sailing metals to and fro from different bases. Because most of the basic metals can be found in the Black Forest, I tended to build a lot of my bases on the coastline here, so I could utilise some of the smaller bodies of water as natural harbours. The only problem with doing this in the Black Forest is that the land tends to be pretty steep and uneven, especially along the coast, so that led me to creating bases that were built underground rather than above it. Due to the way the ground behaves when you mine it, it's impossible to create Minecraft-style tunnels in Valheim, but thankfully there is a way that you can fake it, so long as you can find a suitable spot where there's a large rock like this. You see, not only can you mine through rocks, but you can also dig under them too. So what I decided to do was build a structure on top of this rock with a cargo entrance coming out from underneath it that would lead to some docks. So, standing on the centre of this rock, I dug down into it and then through it in the direction of the ocean. Technically, I could have gone much deeper here and gone right underneath the rock, but I chose to mine through it instead, so that I didn't have to make too much of a staircase in the centre. But it would have been possible to have a whole unbroken rock sat atop an entrance if I'd wanted. Once through to the other side, I was then able to place down my dock and create a basic entrance in the rock, whilst also turning an accidental hole I'd created in that rock into a natural chimney. Once that was done, I went back inside this rock and opened up the interior a bit more. Then I stacked some chests in the back to maximise some storage space, and then I began construction of my staircase. In order for it to reach the opening at the top, I'd need to curve the staircase around the rock wall slightly, but getting the top of it above ground wasn't too difficult in the end. Then all I needed to do was build myself a fancy base on top of that. For this one I used a stone foundation, which I then covered with a wooden floor, but this time, because I wasn't following basic Viking builds, I was able to add a few more flourishes to it all. The base I'd laid out was square, so I decided to separate this into two separate halves, each with a slightly different height to the ceiling, and taking inspiration from a friend's build, I put in some big windows that I finished off with some wooden crosses. I'm particularly fond of this big cathedral-esque window here that looks out onto the sea, but I also figured out that by embedding these crosses into the walls of the base, you can also add a bit of depth and personality to the exterior. Once all that was done, all that was left for me to do was decorate the interior, and I particularly enjoyed turning this area here by the big window into some kind of banquet hall with food and booze on the table and a variety of trophies and hangings dotted around to add a bit of vibrance to the proceedings. So, how about a tour then? Well, starting off at the docks here, you get a lovely view of the whole base, plus the secret storage entrance. Heading through that door inside the cave, you come face to face with a load of room to store loot. And then, if you head upstairs, above is a large room that has become my crafting and fermentation area. If you head from there into the main hall and turn right, you can get a beautiful view through the banquet hall window, and it's especially wonderful on a sunny day. And then, on the back on a raised platform, is where I've put my bed. Then, standing out on the opposite side of the base, you can see the front entrance with all the fancy embellishments that I added along the way. I particularly liked playing with different sized roofs for this build, as it makes the base look way more interesting from the outside.
My ancestors once said that old love does not corrode, But in the swamps, everything corrodes. So let's get around that by building a base in the trees.
The spooky swamps are a terrible place to be, and thanks mainly to all the mean things that lurk beneath the shallow waters, your options for building a big base are pretty limited. That's why for this area I decided to construct my very own treehouse base. Now, there are quite a few fallen trees in this biome, but this one here caught my eye immediately. It's pretty much perfectly placed, gently sloping upwards and winding between a couple of tree trunks to form what's basically a natural walkway leading right up to the middle of a tree. So first things first, I added some nice safety railings along the side of the tree, popped down some torches to light my way along it, and then I set to work on the base proper. Now, the important thing to remember about this area is that, because it's so wet, your wooden structures will rot away at a much faster rate than other, less soggy biomes. To combat this, you're going to want to put roofs over everything wooden that you place down, starting with your fire, which you'll need to place somewhere on the ground near the tree so you can benefit from its warmth once you're up there in the base. One of the best things about building tree houses is that any wooden building blocks you attach directly to the trunk of the tree will not need any support, so you can build small structures relatively quickly and easily. You can even use this method to spam wooden floor tiles up the side of a tree if you quickly need to harvest some gut from a gut sack, and this means not having to deal with the faff of placing downstairs. Due to the fast rotting nature of the environment, large structures like the one I'm building here will need plenty of supports, so make sure you've got a lot of core wood available before you build something if you're not using cheats. Oh, and if you're anything like me and you're very slow at putting roofs onto your structures, you'll also need to regularly run around and fix up all that rapidly rotting wood. With all this in mind, it didn't take me too long to make a passable treehouse, which could easily hold a bed, a teleporter and some chests, but I wanted to go higher, so I started to create a balcony on the side and then a network of stairs leading off of that, which wrapped up and around the tree. Again though, rotting wood was an issue, so in order to save myself the hassle of having to constantly run around repairing everything, I even went to the effort of placing sections of roofing tiles all along the walkways in order to protect them. Alrighty, tour time. As you can see, I've once again utilised those wooden crosses on the front of this base in order to form a fancy window, and I've got a cook station set up on the fire below, which is protected from mobs by spikes and walls. Moving on to the cool natural walkway, it's now nice and bright, and at the top you can see that the base itself is locked up nice and tightly thanks to this ward by the door. Inside the base it's pretty bare though, but it has all the basic amenities in order for me to repair items and rest between crypt runs. Plus there's that teleport there for transportation of non-metal resources. I opted for quite a wide walkway on the side here, and the high roof provides me with an excellent line of sight around the area, which I can use for one-shotting leeches like this prick here. Gotcha! The walkway thins out a bit after that, but the way it wraps around the tree means I basically have a 360-degree view of the area, and can defend the base from attackers no matter which direction they're approaching from. Finally, right at the top of the tree, I placed a simple viewing platform and a chair, just so I could sit up there and survey the stench below me. Although, this type of platform would be a great place for snipers to sit if you wanted to thin out gangs of mobs below, or give your pals some covering fire if you're playing online.
There is no bad weather, only bad clothing, but up here on the mountains, a stone tower will truly protect you from all the elements.
The mountain biomes are cold, inhospitable places, but they hide many secrets, and you're going to need to spend a lot of time up here if you're on a mission to mine silver. While on a little mining expedition of my own, I came across this odd circular structure that was built into the ground, and it looked suspiciously like the remains of an old tower, so of course, I wanted to try to build my own, using this as a foundation. In order to work with stone, like what I've chosen to do here, you are going to need to have a stonecutter workshop in place, so make sure to lug the necessary materials to craft one up the mountain with you if you're keen on doing something similar. This was my first attempt at building on top of one of these structures, and my idea to create a wall of interlinking stones, just like you'd see in a castle wall, didn't work out too well, as laying the bricks this way didn't seem to quite match up with the shape of the base's foundation. Still, even though it came out a little bit crooked, the walls went up fairly easily, and it wasn't long before I was able to place an iron gate in the doorway so that I could keep everything inside nice and secure. The next thing I tried to do was build a spiral staircase up along the inside of the wall, which, to be honest with you, was pretty tricky as the stone blocks would not always have enough support beneath them and would either crumble away or would attach themselves at weird angles. But in the end, I think I made a pretty decent go of it. A wooden floor was my next goal, and I managed to get that down without too many issues, but even though the floor covered the entire top of the base, in order to get my resting and sheltered boosts when I stood below it, I would need to cover the entire structure with a roof first. Obviously, this is by far the most sensible course of action, but then I spotted the magnificent view, which was bloody awesome, so of course I forgot all about the roof and made myself a little balcony instead, just so I could enjoy the panoramic scenery to its fullest. Now, obviously, if you've got the patience, you could make your tower way taller than this one here, but considering this was already perched on the top of the world, I didn't see the need to go any higher, especially seeing as, when I found this structure originally, I discovered that you could remove the floor at the bottom of it in order to open up yet another chamber below. So basically, there was loads of room. So, heading right down to the bottom of the base, my next job was to make the interior all cozy and livable, and to do that, I'd need a fire. But unfortunately, plopping a fire down in an enclosed structure like this is a great way to suffocate to death. So I decided to experiment and make a chimney that went right up through the centre of the tower and out through a newly added roof. Again, this wasn't perfect, as the chimney itself took up a lot of space inside the tower and the heat from the fire didn't travel all the way to the top floor, but it did work, technically, so I kept it in there. If I was to do this build again, however, I think I'd probably construct little fire rooms that protruded from the side of the tower instead, just so I could heat multiple floors at once, whilst also giving myself a lot more space to work with on each level. So here's a look at the final build anyway. It's nowhere near perfect, but as you can see, I've added a few hangings to the underside of the balcony here in order to give it all a splash of colour and hopefully draw the eye away from the wonky side a bit. Walking inside the tower and onto the first floor, you can really see now how much space this chimney takes up, but still there was enough room tucked away behind it here to give myself a little dinner table with an extra place set for a date, just in case I ever got lucky. Heading down to floor -1 means running down this cool spiral staircase, and here I've just enough room to place my bed next to the chimney. Then, just below that on floor -2 is where the fire and storage room is located, and here I've also placed a ward so people can't nick all my stuff. The rooftop meeting hall though is by far my favourite part of this structure. Despite the chimney running right up through it, there's still a load of room here to entertain guests or just to fill up with furniture and crafting benches. But in all seriousness, it's this view from the balcony here that makes this build one of my favourites, even though I think the layout is a bit crap. I mean, just look at it, it's mind-blowing, and you can see for miles, even on a snowy day like this one.
This final stop may be the most difficult of all, but remember, you will reach your destination, even though you travel slowly.
I absolutely hate the planes. The Fullings are numerous and super hard to defeat, and the less said about the fricking Deathsquitos, the better. So that's why, when I was looking to build a base that would protect me from this punishing biome's many dangers, I decided to cast my eyes upwards. The plains are littered with these gigantic vertical rock formations, so of course one of the first things I wanted to do when I saw one was to climb to the top of it and build a base. Getting to the top of this towering rock was actually rather easy because, like using wood on trees in the swamps, stone blocks will stick to this natural stone without the need for supports. Getting around the corners of this formation proved to be much more of a challenge than just going in a straight line, and also it was rather nerve-wracking, especially as I climbed ever upwards, but with a bit of patience I managed to reach the top without falling off once. Making this staircase was probably the quickest and easiest way to scale this beast, but be warned, you're going to need an incredible amount of stone resources in order to do this without the creative mode cheat. Once I reached the summit, I set about levelling off the top of the rock with my pickaxe, and then I used everything I'd learnt so far to build myself a really fancy pad in the clouds. To maximise the view, I opted for a really high ceiling and some very fancy windows on two of the sides. I also used core wood alongside almost every edge of the walls, just to provide as much support to the structure as possible. It was only once I'd pretty much finished the base though that I realised a fatal flaw in my plans, and that was the fact that I'd left myself no room at all to build a fire, and you can't sleep without one. There's no way the heat from a fire on the ground would be able to reach me up here, and I didn't fancy tangling with another chimney build, so I grit my teeth and I mined into the rock just below my base. Now, I had no idea whether or not doing this would collapse the base that I'd just spent almost an hour building, so this was a nail-biting task for me to perform. But in the end, everything held fast, and once I'd cleared enough space, I was able to lay down a big fire pit and then neaten up that mine section with some more stone blocks and an iron gate. My final task then was just to decorate the place with some lovely hangings, a rug or two, a couple of chests to store all my gold and loot in, and of course a nice big bed to sleep on. But after doing all of that, I couldn't help but feel like something was missing. So, after adding a couple of extra sections and a few more supports, I built this incredible throne balcony on the side so I could feel like a true king of Valhalla. But how does the finished thing look, you may be wondering? Well, let's see. The walk up the tower itself doesn't take as long as you'd expect if you sprint up it. Careful of those corners, mind. And once you get near the top, there's a nice little recess here for you to check in on the fire and make sure it's stocked up with enough wood in order to keep it burning through the night. Heading up and around now to the entrance, there's this little porch area here and a great view of one of the sides of the base. Heading inside, you can see all the decorations are in place. There's storage space, a giant bed, a couple of workbenches for doing any necessary repairs, but the real star of the show here is, of course, the throne porch. I mean, come on, just drink in this view. And if I spin the camera around here, you can also get a great wide shot of my little Viking having the time of his life surveying the lands that stretch out ahead of him. But the big question on my lips, and I assume everyone else's too, is if that little Viking man jumps off the edge there, can that little Viking man make it into the sea, or will that little Viking man hit the earth with a splat? Well, there's only one way to find out. For sausages or glory! Wow, he actually made it! I would have put money on him becoming Viking Jam, to be honest with you, but at least now I don't have to do the corpse run all the way down those stairs, I guess.
And there we go, Viking friends. I hope my tales of building and adventuring have inspired you to head off into Valhalla and build some beautifully bonkers bases of your own. Do give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to Eurogamer for daily videos about video games, including more about Valheim when we've got it. And if you can't wait for those, why not click on some of these other videos about Valheim that are on screen right now. Good luck in purgatory, friends. Wait, Do I spy a band of grey dwarfs tearing down my lovely longhouse? Dear, dear, Odin owns you all!